Do we ever feel like we're where we need to be?
No.
No, we don't. Do I try? Yes. Do I put my whole soul and heart in it? I don't think I really do. I had a dream the other night. I went to sleep a few nights ago laying there thinking about people that are not here with us, among us today, that have influenced my life. And it seemed like it was endless. Endless, the people. As you get older, you realize you got less people that you were close to around you. If it didn't come here, I wouldn't have much of a base at all. It would be Coral and I. But in this, as I was thinking about this, I fell asleep. And Jesus was in my dream. That doesn't happen very often. But he had came back, and I remember in this dream the disappointment that I felt about myself, about things I could have done better. We can make excuses in our life. The car's broke down. I can't wait till tomorrow. I've got to work on it today, and it's Sunday. Or somebody else's car, there's an ox in the ditch, basically. Snow, you need to get the snow out of the driveway. How does the Lord look on that? Is it important? Well, it's important to us of what we do for ourselves, but is it really important to God? And listening to our dear sisters this morning, Vicki was talking about, looking at ourselves, the things that we've done. I remember a patriarch years ago saying, you need to take inventory of your life. And we need to do that every day. We need to take inventory, what's important and what's not important, because people do inventory in stores, in factories. They have to know what they've got, what they need ahead of time. Well, we need to do things like you were talking about, doing food preparation the day before. That simple thing, but it's not before the Lord. It's not a simple thing, because that's doing it in the proper way. You're not laboring on Sunday doing the things that you normally do. We should be thinking and reflecting more on the Lord. How many people were reflecting on the Lord when we were watching the Chiefs get throttled? Jesus is so much more important than that in our lives. And so am I doing everything I could do? No. Do I want to? Yes, I do. Well, how bad do I want to? And that's where I have to deal with that myself, just as each one of us do. No one can tell us what we need to do. No, we know within ourselves what we have to do. I'm with you about our children. We did the things, raising our children, trying to get them to learn and be obedient, but also kind of giving them their own space. And so we should have been grandparents before we were parents. Because we got a lot of experience and we're better grandparents, but our time of parenting is over. And we don't have as much influence with our kids anymore, but they love us. And I know your sons love you, and but it's different. We don't have the control that we had in. So we can't let that get out of control. We can't let that detain us from doing better ourselves now, and just hope that that makes a difference for our children.
Thank you. I think you mentioned some things that are very important. We're not perfect. We might want to be, but how much effort do we put in becoming more perfect? That's a question each of us have to answer individually, and we're each going to grow at a different rate. And we should not judge our neighbor because his growth is different than our own, whether it be faster or slower. Because his growth is what's important to him in God's eyes. Your growth is what's important to you in God's eyes. Now, as we grow, I want to share this with you. If you will take and do a few easy steps in growing spiritually to keep the Sabbath day holy, other more important things will open to you. Now, you mentioned a small step, the wife preparing food for Sunday. Well, that's not such an easy step because you can't just prepare anything and let it set for 12 or 24 hours. So there has to be some thought given to it. But the important part of it is you're thinking about preparing ahead for the Sabbath. And that's probably as important as the food itself. But if you'll take that step, okay, other steps will open to you. And that's the promise that I make to you, that I've learned from this study. And I think that was the intent of the author. Exercises in growing spiritually. If you'll do the first simple exercise, the next exercise will become apparent. And I can relate that to all kinds of things in life, especially sports. Kids will start to learn to pass the ball. In the next exercise, maybe they'll begin to dribble the ball, and then to shoot the ball, and then, teamwork, so on and forth. You just keep growing till you have a basketball team, hopefully. If there's no talent like in my world, we just went through the exercises. But my point is, if we start with the simple exercises, we grow understanding of the more difficult exercises. But more importantly, and I stress this, more importantly than how fast we grow is the joy we feel in doing it. There is no benefit to you if you do not feel joy in keeping the Sabbath holy. Paramount. It's something you must want to do, you must enjoy to do, and you must believe in doing it there is value. Without those things, a decree from the Lord to do it is not going to suffice in your heart. Does that make sense? Okay. If I could teach nothing else in this 3 weeks, that probably is number one. Because if there's joy in doing it, the longevity will be much greater. And your blessing will be much greater. Okay, let's continue. I want to hear from all of you where you stand right now in keeping the Sabbath holy. Where do you think you stand right now in keeping the Sabbath holy? Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. We're really good at doing the nap in the afternoon.
Okay.
After church, everybody comes home. Eddie's always late. He brings his bacon in his pocket. Erin has her special food. I try and have something fixed that will blend in with everybody else, and then we throw everything in the dishwasher, and Eddie takes a nap, Erin takes a nap, and then Eddie sets his timer and gets up and goes on his way. That's about where we're at. It's the whole meal thing is tough because in the past we used to have the whole family over on Sunday, and it was a big job, and that's kind of difficult to do if you have grandkids visiting or something. You just have to modify your plan. I guess I grew up, my grandpa always talked about the Lamb's Book of Life, so that when you meet your Maker, you are responsible for those things that you did and those things that you didn't do. And I guess it's not a guilt trip, but it's always kind of in the back of my head because what my grandpa said, that's what you did. He was a very, he sounded stern. He was a teddy bear, but it was when he said things, you really remembered them.
When I didn't look over the stuff last night, but last week I did, and when I look over the list, I think, okay, well, there's some things that I do pretty well. I generally do not go shopping on Sunday. I don't go out to eat generally on Sunday. I come to church if I'm here. I do watch TV. I try to, like when the Chiefs are playing, of course, I do that, but I would never do that in place of coming to church if there was something going on. Vicki says, lay down and watch them. Like Vicki, I'm good at the napping part. In the cooking, I'm by myself, so I just stick something in the microwave. It's not a big deal. So there's some boxes that I can check that I feel good about, but I have many more that I obviously need to work on. I mean, I can't remember now. I know TV was one of the things that, to not watch TV. Well, I do, but there again, I tried, if it's not Chief season, then I will, if I watch something, it's like a feel-good movie or something, but I don't know. I have a ways to go, but there are a few boxes that I can feel okay about checking off. You want to say something? Say it.
Well, I'm with her. I watch way too much TV. I try to keep the Sabbath holy, and I try to rest, but I can't take a nap. I'm sorry. I just can't do that. Okay. But I think my problem is entertaining myself by watching TV. I should entertain myself by reading and studying, probably.
Thank you. We give you, yes, sir.
You want it first? Okay. One week we talked about, I think it was in this class, the Jewish traditions. And I think that we look at their traditions and pattern our ideas of keeping the Sabbath holy with their traditions. And, Albert said something about his friends here at church and the fellowship. Some places you can't talk in the sanctuary after service. Well, if you're fellowshipping, and maybe, I hope I'm not stepping on people's toes, but, fellowshipping is very important. And, cooking meals, that's kind of a necessity to have food. And some people have their families over, that's fellowship. I know that when I was younger, a lot younger, we went to reunion and they wouldn't let us swim on Sunday. That's fellowship, and it's a good place. It's at a reunion. You're with people, your friends, and in Christ. What's wrong with fellowshipping with them in the pool? So I think any type of fellowship you do with those you love, with your church family, is very important. And I know I might be rationalizing, but my daughter is a nut Chiefs fan. I mean, she's just obsessed. She came home a couple of weeks ago, and we went to Arrowhead. That's what she wanted to do. So we did a tour of Arrowhead. And we watch, she lives in Denver, but we watch every football game together. She calls up, and we're on the phone for 3.5 hours. And it's a bonding thing. It's a fellowship thing. And that's about the only time I get to talk to her And, maybe I can get, and somebody said when the Chiefs game's over, there's nothing to look at. Well, I'm a Royals fan too, so there's baseball on Sunday. But, if you're fellowshipping, if it's, if it's a place that, you wouldn't be ashamed for Jesus to be there with you. He's probably not a football fan, but, I think that he's happy that my daughter and I have that time together. So, I think the fellowship thing is a real important thing. It might not be resting, but it is fellowshipping, the right way.
That's probably one of the toughest things for us to really consider, because I'm sure that each one of us in the room have a different idea of what keeping the Sabbath means and what is that target. When have I reached that, yes, I'm keeping the Sabbath day holy? I've been taught in different times of my years that I kept my white shirt and tie on all day, my Sunday dress, or that I did church work, or that I did not watch television, I did not travel, I did not cook meals. All of those kind of things, that was the target. I'm not saying I did it, but that was the target. So we all may have somewhat of a pharisaical idea of what keeping the Sabbath day means. I think the number one thing the Lord wants us to do is to do whatever we do in fellowship and relationship with Him, in that we grow with Him in the activities that we do. Do it all unto Him on that particular day. Cindy was a nurse. She had to work quite frequently on the weekends. Other things get in the way. When the kids are little, you just about have to feed the kids. It's pretty hard to prepare 12 hours ahead, like you said, or 24 hours ahead to have, but you can keep it simple, I guess. Macaroni and cheese isn't too hard to cook, but pharisaitically, you don't even do that. I think going back into the old Jewish customs, the old law, they did nothing. They couldn't step on a crack on the sidewalk, etc., on the Sabbath day, because somehow or another that was breaking the Sabbath. You couldn't go out and glean in the fields because that was breaking the Sabbath, and the list was probably 150, 250 points long as to what you couldn't do. Do what you have to do, and do it with the Lord in mind and with that desire to spend time with Him. I think that's really the main thing the Lord wants us to do. I think fellowship is good. I agree with Steve. The Lord probably is not a big Chiefs fan because He's probably also an Eagles fan and so forth. Oh, can't say that. But that's, He doesn't take favorites in sports. At least I don't believe. He wants everybody to have fun and be safe, but not take favorites. But I think you get the points. We can become very pharisaical about what we think the Sabbath is. For me, am I doing a good job on the Sabbath? Not necessarily as good as I could do, because I don't wear my white shirt all day. Is that something that's necessary? I don't know. In the Mormon church, when we were there, the Sabbath was oftentimes spent doing home teaching or home visiting with it. So that was church work and going out. But we knew families that would not travel. My families were usually a long distance away, so they wouldn't get in the car and drive. They always drove on Saturday or they drove on Monday so that they could spend Sunday with family and going to church and doing churchy kind of things. So and you mentioned not judging our neighbor. I think that's good, because our neighbor may be in a different place than we are in that walk. But the Sabbath was made for man, that we might be able to rejoice and to grow closer to Him and not be so critical as to what it is a person is doing that may cause. I suppose somebody could say, if I go out and walk along the creek in my backyard, that I'm working. But that's a good time for me to meditate and to spend time in prayer and so forth with Him. So for me, that's a Sabbath activity.
Thank you. Go ahead.
First of all, Steve, thanks for not doing something that I heard several years ago. Many of us in the room were in priesthood meetings or retreats where President Larson would ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being perfectly righteous and 0 being unrighteous, what is your number of your righteousness? And then sometimes if somebody didn't raise their hand immediately and start talking like you were having trouble getting some of us to talk. And it's always easier for me to listen to my brothers and sisters talk about their situation with the Sabbath day being holy and hang back. But since you said, well, I want to hear from all of you, with President Larson's question, to me, I always thought it's a no-win situation. If I say, I'm about a 9.7 or maybe it could be a 10 because I'm that righteous, or if I say, well, I'm about a 1.5, everybody's listening, oh my gosh, either he's not humble at all or he is really one of the most unrighteous people, and what is he doing here amongst us? Okay, well, you didn't say give me a number on your level of keeping the Sabbath day holy, and I'm glad you didn't, because it would be hard for me to give you a number. I don't mow my lawn on the Sabbath. It either gets mowed on a Saturday or maybe a Monday. That's pretty good, right? Even though it is a power mower, and I just kind of walk by. It is good to not judge one another and, well, I saw Mike doing this on the Sabbath, and then it's pretty easy for some of us to say, well, it's kind of like, that's my ox in the ditch. Well, you know, the scripture talking about, well, if your ox is in the ditch, you know, don't let your ox die in the ditch or whatever. Or if you've got meat prepared, or, you know, don't let it go bad. I've got room to do better, but as has been discussed about food preparation or watching TV or whatever, I could have recorded the Chiefs game and then just told everybody, don't tell me who won the Super Bowl until I'm going to watch it Monday morning, but please don't tell me who. I think I probably would have heard who won. So yeah, I watched the Super Bowl, but I would say I've got a lot of room for growth. So we got 3 weeks to start getting it right, along with all of our other commandments that the Lord wants us to abide by as we go through this probationary period. That really didn't tell you a whole lot. Fair.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, Julie and I have, I can't even remember when we started this. It seemed like all of our married life that we've always fasted on Sunday morning before coming to church. And Julie normally has the music playing, preparing us for that. But now we're in a different situation. Our friends in Utah worship on Saturday. And so this coming Saturday, I'm going to spend a good part of the day traveling, go out there, which would be against what they would normally want you to do. So I can meet on Sunday, which is what, you know, our friends here, you all, would say, you know, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. So I don't know, but overall, looking at everything, I think we've got room to improve. As someone in our house reminds me occasionally that it is a Sabbath, we shouldn't be doing this. So we have room for improvement.
Thank you. You know, you hear that in almost every testimony. We all have room for improvement, and thank goodness we feel that way. Let me share a couple things with you as the class time is escaping from us. I'm sorry, did I miss someone? Go ahead. Go ahead. My apology.
To me, living the Sabbath day, sacrificing, it's sacrificing the time from my watching TV or doing something that would really discourage me in many ways. But to me, it's eating a fast lunch, going to the room, studying the scriptures for about an hour, and resting for about 30 minutes, then going door to door, visiting with the residents where I'm at, and witnessing to them of the love of God and how much He cares for them. And many of them have fear. They feel that God has let them down because they're at where they're at. And I just say to them, well, it's part of God's plan for you. You got a purpose here. There's something that needs to be done here. Just seeing a smile, just seeing you smile brightens everybody's day. Then I think of the Jews, what Jesus said to them. Lovest thou me more than these things? Feed my sheep. How many of us do that on the Sabbath? As the Lord would do.
Thank you. Let me share a couple things with you, and then we'll discuss these things in greater length next week. One, and I suspect all of us are guilty of this. If I want to do something, I can justify it. And I had an aunt one time tell a group of saints, when you stand before the bar of judgment, you're not going to be given the opportunity to justify what you've done. I don't know where she come up with that scripture, but you think about it, there's probably a lot of truth in that, a lot of direct behavior in that. I can, I'm 80-something years old. I think back to some pretty marvelous things. Grew up in a small branch, the church in Stanton, Texas. No priesthood. Raymond Stone drove 100 miles every Sunday and preached and conducted Sunday school class every Sunday. After church, they went to our house every Sunday, and the women prepared dinner, usually chicken. Joe Benstone and I kept the Sabbath holy by riding milk pen calves all afternoon long. Now, I can justify a lot by saying we had fellowship, and we become lifelong friends, very close association. But I can't stand in front of God and say we kept the Sabbath holy. I don't have any regrets of our friendship. But then I didn't have an understanding that there was more to the Sabbath than just playing, no matter what my age. So I'm telling you, no matter what your age, we need to involve not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. And as you reconcile those two things, each of you in his own mind, as you reconcile those two things, you will grow in a spiritual sense in keeping the Sabbath holy. I truly believe that. And I also believe that it must be done with a great deal of joy in doing it. If you're not enjoying improving your Sabbath holy exercises, don't waste your time. It will avail you nothing. Now I'm step down off my preaching throne for a second. I really want us to examine ourselves so that we can begin to improve this thing of keeping the Sabbath holy. Why is it important? Well, I happen to agree with the stake president in Denver when he said there's 4 clouds over Zion. 1 is keeping the word of wisdom. 2 is keeping the financial law. 3 is sanctity of the home. And the 4th was keeping the Sabbath day holy. I think there's more wisdom in those 4 things than we can even contemplate in a small classroom with 1 hour. Yes, ma'am.
This whole class has reminded me of Adam's experience when he was making a sacrifice, and the angel came to him and said, "Why are you doing this?" And then he was given the gospel at that point. He was following the letter of the law, but he didn't know why. And that's why we study. We want to understand why we need to do these things and have joy in doing them because they're the right thing to do.
Thank you. Better said than I said. Any other comments before we close? Yes, sir.
Well, you know, in the beginning of that chapter it says the Hebrew meaning of Sabbath is rest, but especially in a lot of our Latter-day scriptures, we're to worship the Lord. And so sometimes worshiping the Lord might not be that restful to us because we're getting tired sitting in church and stuff. But I always make sure if church is open, I'm there. But I think that's another important thing of Sabbath. We have to remember that we are worshiping Him.
Thank you. Next week, we'll take up a little more in depth in what happens if you have to work on Sunday, what happens, if the ox is in the ditch, so on and so forth. We'll take up some of that subject and hopefully come to some reasonable conclusions to help you. With that in mind, I would urge you to read some of the scriptures on page 27 and 28 of your book. I think they'll give you a good foundation for our discussion next week. Thank you very much for your class, and thank you folks for joining us on streaming. I hope you've enjoyed it. And for those that have warm weather, we're envious.